Welcome to this installment of the NRC Safety Series, Safety on the Railroad. This series of instructional videos has been made possible by the National Railroad Construction and Maintenance Association, better known as the NRC. Financial support has been provided from the proceeds of our annual equipment auction. Donated equipment from the railroads has made this entire safety series available to our active members free of charge. The use of these informative videos is up to the individual companies to use as an enhancement to their existing safety program. It is highly recommended that a company representative be present during the viewing session. We have also provided a test to further reinforce the importance of the demonstrated safety procedures that should always be followed while on a railroad job site. Again, the use of this test is up to each individual company's discretion. The NRC accepts no responsibility or liability concerning the use of the content and testing materials provided in this video production. It is simply our intent to offer an effective reference tool that will inform and educate on the utmost importance of safety to those working in the railroad industry. Reproduction of these DVDs is a violation of copyright laws without permission from the NRC. These videos are for active NRC members only. The NRC is a not-for-profit organization consisting of railroad contractors, along with material and service suppliers to the rail industry. Now, sit back and enjoy this presentation. And remember, safety on the railroad begins with you. We will now discuss personal protection equipment, or PPE. These are items that you must wear for protection from harm to your body. They are worn to raise visibility on the job site, prevent objects from entering your body, and lessen impact in the event of being struck. The use of PPE can save you from injury and possibly save your life. PPE includes, but is not limited to, the following items: safety helmet, safety glasses, goggles or shields, reflective vest, gloves, work boots, respirator, ear protection, and leg protection. PPE must be worn at all times during the course of your daily activities and may be required at other times as well. Check with your supervisor, safety representative, and your company's policy for specific requirements. Prior to any day's activity, it is imperative to hold a job briefing. During this briefing, the following must be addressed: the day's work schedule, the exit plan, necessary safety protection, emergency plan, identifying of emergency trained personnel, establishing the chain of command, on-track protection, and any unusual conditions that may affect the crew's safety. The job briefing session should never be overlooked and is required as a minimum for safety on the railroad. It creates strong communication, increases productivity, and could actually save someone's life. In this segment of the NRC Safety Series, we're going to introduce you to the basic safety rules when working around hot metal and flames. This is not intended to replace any aspect of the FRA Part 214 rules, which is a federal regulation that any person working on or around railroad track must have received the proper training under the FRA Part 214 guidelines and the owner of the railroad prior to entering the right-of-way. Uncontrolled fire is one of the most devastating forces that we can face. In an instant, our homes, our land, our very lives can become in jeopardy. Fire-related damages create costs in the billions each year. Not to mention the price of suffering that affected families and communities have to bear. One truth that we must never lose sight of is this: most uncontrolled fires can be prevented. When working out on the rail, you'll be performing duties that could pose the threat of a fire. During this program, we'll be going over various safeguards to identify and avoid potential fire hazards. But it is also just as important that you learn about extinguishing small fires. Anytime that you are working at a hot work job site, a fire situation can happen. Knowing proper extinguishing methods for fires caused by the work you are doing could one day save your life, your coworkers' lives, and the lives of others that could become threatened by an uncontrolled fire. Helping us to learn about some aspects of fire extinguishing is Butch D. Butch has served local communities as a firefighter for over 30 years, with 20 of those performing in a leadership role as fire chief. He also gives presentations on fire prevention and safety regularly. Butch, thank you for taking the time to be with us. As a firefighter, is it your experience that most fires happen due to unforeseen causes, or could they have been prevented?
Well, Kevin, fires don't just happen. They're caused by something. And unfortunately, many fires are started due to work activities that are potential fire hazards. However, just about all these types of fire situations could have been prevented by just two practices: pre-planning and having the knowledge to contain a fire.
What is pre-planning in regard to fire safety?
It's keeping a watchful eye out for potential hazards and minimizing them to the best of your ability. Remember, it's always best to stop a fire before it starts. But sometimes an unforeseen problem can occur even if you feel that you've planned properly. That's why you must always have an action plan in place to put out a fire should you be involved in work that could potentially cause a fire.
We're going to be providing tips on recognizing fire hazards throughout the program. But could you please tell us which pre-planning practice is one of the most important to do before performing most hot work on the rail?
You always want to be aware of your surroundings and where your safe area begins. By that I mean, how far out can the sparks, burned metal, or any other hazards fly from your place of work? Once you've determined that, give yourself a few extra feet beyond for safety and mark the radius. The area outside this radius is your safe area. The area inside the radius is your danger zone. If there is anything that is flammable or can catch fire within the danger zone, it must be removed and placed in the safe area.
There are a variety of tools and circumstances during hot work on the rail that could potentially cause a fire situation. However, for our demonstration, we will show how working with a rail drill can start a fire. I'll set the stage. This section of rail was designated as an area where hot work was needed. In an effort to minimize the potential for a fire, the brush was cut down beforehand. Butch, please talk with us through this video and how it pertains to fire safety.
Kevin, this is an interesting scenario because it demonstrates how you can overlook a hazardous situation. Cleaning brush is a good practice because you are literally cutting down the fuel for a fire. However, cleaning up the debris is just as important. These brush cuttings that are left behind can actually act as a kindling.
Now we have our worker coming on the scene. He is wearing the proper PPE, which indicates that he is thinking about his work and paid attention during the earlier job briefing. However, while he is focused on the activity of the job, he hasn't scanned the area. The brush cuttings are a definite fire hazard, and there are some rocks and other debris nearby that are certainly safety hazards in general.
Yes, before performing hot work, You should always make sure to inspect the area for hazards of any kind, especially fire.
Butch, unfortunately the worker had difficulty fueling the rail drill. And while he's trying to clean the drill, there's a lot of gas on the ground. Plus, the gas-soaked rag and gas can are too close to the work area. This isn't good. Gasoline is extremely flammable, and the fumes are very easy to ignite. Now we really have a situation to deal with. The spark from the rail drill caused the gas fumes to ignite, and we've got a fire that could easily spread.
Yes, we do. And the worker is lucky that he himself didn't catch fire. It's a good thing he was wearing proper clothing and PPE. The best way to handle this fire before it worsens is by the use of a fire extinguisher. But remember, there are specific types of fire extinguishers developed for each category of fire. For this situation, an ABC type extinguisher is most effective.
I have to add that any rail worker that doesn't know that there are different types of fires, such as chemical and oil, or that they require the proper extinguisher, should consult his supervisor before performing any hot work.
I completely agree. Using the wrong extinguisher could have disastrous results. You could actually make the fire worse and cause it to spread.
Okay, let's get back to the video. Butch, is there a right way to use an extinguisher?
Most definitely. We refer to it as the pass method. First, you pull the safety cotter pin from the top of the extinguisher to enable it. Then, you want to aim it in the direction of the fire at an angle that will allow the chemicals to cover the fire. Next, holding the hose securely with one hand, squeeze the trigger. The chemicals will shoot out pretty quick, so anticipate a little bit of a kick. Then, you'll want to disperse the chemicals by using a sweeping motion. You want to smother the fire, but you also want to be sure that you are saturating the path of the fire as well. Once the fire is contained, continue the process to be sure that it is completely extinguished.
Well, it looks like this fire situation is under control and appears to have been extinguished. Is there anything else that needs to be done?
You have to notify the local fire department and alert them. If you don't have the number, call 911. Only a qualified individual trained in fire safety can determine when a fire situation is safe. If this fire is not completely extinguished, it could potentially start again and escalate to a very dangerous situation. Don't let your pride cause harm to someone else. Make the call.
Butch, is there anything else that you would like to add?
Yes, Kevin. When it comes to hot work and fire safety, nothing is more important than the job briefing. The types of work, the potential fire hazard, the action plan including extinguisher information, and other related subjects such as emergency phone numbers must be discussed. Workers should also be prepared to listen, understand, and to ask questions when necessary. Not only should you have respect for the possibility of fire and the potential danger it can cause, you need to have respect for the safety of yourself and others. Don't put anything or anyone at risk. Remember, just when you think that will never happen to me, it does.
Thanks, Butch. We truly learned a lot today, and we greatly appreciate your time. Now we're going to take a closer look at the practices of safety around hot rail. Before we do any cutting of metal, we must have a good emergency action plan established. This means that we have gone through all the possible problems that could happen and have established a course of action if they do happen. This plan must identify the following: the escape procedure, nearest fire extinguisher and the right type, firefighting equipment, emergency phone list. This plan is only effective if it is communicated to all involved. Make sure you discuss this with the people that may be working around you. The two basic principles of a good plan are communication and protection. These emergency action plans must be addressed prior to any cutting or welding. A plan which is written but not followed is the same as not having a plan at all. Prior to doing any torch cutting, we must inspect the following equipment. The oxygen cylinder. Cylinders should be in the upright position and must be securely attached to an object that cannot tip over, or they must be positioned in an approved cart specifically designed for the cylinder. The valve must be closed. Make sure that the cylinder is not near oil, gasoline, or another combustible material. Keep the bottle away from the welding work. Handle with extreme care, being cautious not to drop or hit them. Do not lift the cylinder by the cap or valve. Never use a hammer or wrench to open the valves. Use only your hand. Do not use a blast of oxygen to blow away dust from your clothing or your work. Oxygen should never be used for pneumatic tools. Make sure that the cylinders cannot come in contact with any type of electrical charge. The acetylene cylinder. These cylinders are typically shorter than an oxygen cylinder, so they too should be stored in the upright position and in a well-ventilated area. Never store them near any heat source. Keep the cap on the cylinder when it is not in use. Never use boiling water or flame to melt ice off of the cylinder. Always be on the lookout for leaking valves or damaged cylinders. Never attempt to check for a leak with a cigarette lighter or use your nose to sniff out the problem. The proper method is to wet down the suspicious area with a small amount of soapy water and look for bubbles that would indicate a leak. The oxygen and acetylene regulators. When working with these regulators, only use the right regulator with the right gas. Typically, the regulator attachment nuts for oxygen tanks use normal threading, while the attachment nuts for acetylene tanks may or may not use reverse threading. This makes it very important to pay close attention and to use the proper adapters if necessary. Reverse threading is identified by notches in the nut. Plus, the threads on the couplers of the tanks themselves are going to be either male threads or female threads. Even if both regulators and tanks are normal threaded, they cannot be reversed due to the type of threads. It is nearly impossible to get them wrong. When connecting the regulators to the tanks, it is a good practice to back off the T-handles that adjust the pressure. This will allow for a longer life of the diaphragms that are inside the regulators. It is also a good practice to back off these valves prior to removing the regulators. If any defects are found with the regulators, do not use them. Only a qualified person should make repairs to any air or gas regulator. The twin cutting hose. These hoses are separate yet clamped together and cannot nor should not be reversed. The acetylene hose is the red one with the reverse thread couplers. The oxygen hose is the green one with the normal threads. These hoses should be handled carefully whether they are in use or stored. Never let the hose come in contact with hot metal or flames, and never allow the hose to be run over by any vehicle or piece of equipment. Never stretch the hose on top of rail. If this is the only pathway available to you, it is a good practice to crib out some ballast and place the hose under the rail. Otherwise, position the tanks on the correct side of the track you will be working on. Also, make sure that spark arresters are installed in the air lines prior to use. Never use hoses that are worn, leaking, or burned. Wrapping with tape should never be used as a repair method. Any and all hose repairs should be done by a qualified person. The cutting torch. When the hoses connect to the torch head, the same threading systems are encountered and should never be reversed. The torch head mixes the two gases together, which creates a flame hot enough to cut steel. This flame reaches a temperature of 6,300 degrees Fahrenheit. To give you an idea of how incredibly hot this is, the temperature of molten steel is about 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Use the proper tip cleaner for cleaning the ports and the outside of the torch tip. It is recommended that you should clean the tips prior to each use and periodically during the work. Never, ever place a lit torch on any surface. Always close all valves and ensure that the flame is out before the torch head leaves your hand. Treat the cutting torch as you would a loaded firearm. Never light or use the torch when it is pointed in the direction of others. When lighting, always use the proper igniter. Never use cigarette lighters, a lit cigar, a match, the hot steel you just burned, or any other open flame to light the torch. This could harm both you and your coworkers. Never burn steel without the proper PPE with extra consideration given to eye protection. Your eyes are extremely vulnerable when burning metal and are at risk for serious injuries and vision impairments, including blindness. Always use the proper eye safeguards, which include visors, goggles, and tinted shields. Skimping on eye protection is putting your eyesight in jeopardy. Don't do it. Always wear the proper gloves, making sure that they are clean and free of any combustible materials like creosote, grease, or gasoline. Always wear appropriate clothing that is also free of combustible materials. Never use a torch while wearing a short-sleeved shirt, shorts, or any style of clothing that could prevent you from working properly. You should avoid wearing work clothes with open pockets where sparks and bits of hot steel may fall into. If your pockets have buttons or Velcro strips, confirm that they are fastened. Always remove any flammable materials from your pockets, such as cigarette lighters and matches. Only a person that is qualified to cut rail is allowed to do so. The FRA does not allow torch cutting of rail or bolt holes. This is due to its weakening effect on the rail, which cause defects that could lead to problems as serious as derailments. Know your FRA 213 standards for your class of railroad prior to any torch cutting on the rail. We will now demonstrate a method for torch cutting a rail. The first thing to do is to look over the entire area and make sure your actions will not cause any fires. Visualize yourself cutting the rail and picture where the sparks and metal will fall. Ensure that a fire extinguisher is close by. After following all the required safety precautions, make certain that the bottles are secured and cannot tip over. Now it is time to connect the regulators to the appropriate tanks. Hook up the hoses to the regulators and connect the torch head to the hoses. Confirm that the valves are in the off position at the cylinders and that the T-handles on the regulators are backed off. Confirm that the valves are closed at the torch head. Now open the oxygen valve all the way and open the acetylene valve about a 1/2 turn. Adjust the pressures on the regulators, typically 15 psi on acetylene and 40 psi on the oxygen. When lighting the torch, open the acetylene valve slightly and ignite the gas using the striker. Now open the acetylene valve a little more until the black smoke goes away, and adjust the oxygen valve to achieve a distinctive pointed tip on the blue flame created by the oxygen flow. Adjust both valves slowly. Now that you have the proper flame adjustment, position yourself comfortably over the rail. Place the torch so it is vertical to the head of the rail. Allow the blue tips of the flames to just make contact on the side of the head of the rail. Once the steel begins to melt, push the handle, allowing the blast of oxygen to blow away the molten steel. Slowly go across the head of the rail with a slight zigzag motion. Once the head of the rail is cut, clean the slag from the web of the rail. Do not use the torch head for this. Starting at the top of the web, begin to cut downward while angling the torch head. Now, chip the slag again and start cutting from the outside of the base to the bottom of the web. Do this on one side of the rail until complete. Now start on the other side and continue cutting from the base web. As you get close to the end of the cut, proceed cautiously and observe any unusual rail movement. After the rail is cut, turn off the acetylene, then the oxygen at the torch head. Turn off the flow of gas at the tanks, and then bleed the remaining air in the line by opening the valves at the torch head and pressing the lever. Use care at all times during this procedure. Now, close the valves at the torch head, back off the T-handles at the regulators, remove the regulators, and install the safety caps on the tanks. There are 4 methods of welding used to join running rail together. One is flash butt welding, which uses a very high ungrounded voltage to create the heat to form the weld. The second method is by thermite welding, which fills a gap between the 2 rails with molten steel. A third method that is being tested is plasma welding, which fills a small gap with an electric arc welding process. The fourth method is creating a weld through conventional bolted connections. Due to the extremely high temperatures and energy involved, welding rail is a very serious and potentially dangerous undertaking. Each method has its own unique process and can only be performed by trained and qualified personnel. If you are working on a job site where rail is being welded, your focus must be directed towards safety. This is done by paying close attention during the job briefing, reviewing the pre-planning checklist, asking questions about anything job-related that you aren't sure of, wearing all required PPE, and making sure that there is nothing combustible in your pockets, like a cigarette lighter. Scanning the area for any potential hazardous or flammable situations. Keeping a constant eye out for the safety of yourself and coworkers. When refueling any equipment, small machine, or combustible engine, there are certain precautions that must be adhered to. You must have a good understanding of the consequences of bad practices. Always make sure that a fire extinguisher is nearby, and never smoke while handling flammable materials. The first rule for refueling is to make certain that the engine is off. If the fill nozzle of the equipment is near the engine, let the engine cool down. Before refueling, make sure that you are putting the proper fuel in the tank. Never put diesel fuel in a gasoline engine or vice versa. Confirm absolutely whether the engine requires mixed gas or straight gas. If the engine requires mixed gas, ensure that you are using the proper ratio between oil and gas. If in doubt, don't guess. Ask someone who knows or who has read the placard. Putting the wrong fuel in any piece of equipment can cause very costly repairs and could cause serious injuries. When refueling, only use a certified pump or a safety gas can equipped with a spark arrestor. Never siphon flammable fluids from one tank to another. Maintain contact between the nozzle of the pump or can and the opening of the fuel tank. While fuel is being poured, it can cause static electricity which could ignite the vapors. Never overfill a tank. If the equipment is in hot sun, the fuel will expand, causing an overflow. Control the flow of the fuel and avoid spills. It is also a very good practice to chock the wheels of any vehicles involved in the refueling process. Check with your safety manager about grounding requirements. When filling a gas can, always do it outdoors with good ventilation. Maintain contact between the nozzle, pipe, flexible hose, or other attachment and the container. Control the flow of the fluid and, above all, avoid spills. It is also very important to turn off cell phones and portable radios, as well as any device that may cause static electricity or transmit radio waves. Never fill a gas can while it is in the bed of the truck. Always place it on the ground first. After any refueling, secure all gas caps and valves. Never assume someone else will do this. Immediately clean up any spills according to your company policy. Make sure that hoses have been drained of any fuel. Always give refueling your full attention and avoid any distractions or diversions during the process. Now that we have given you the basics of working around hot work, it is time for you to learn more from your individual companies. Proper training and experience are vital to your safety and the safety of personnel that work around you. Ultimately, it serves to provide a good work environment and to get you through the workday as safely as possible. But always remember that safety starts with you. We have now concluded the presentation on hot work. It is time for you to take the test. If your company has not implemented this test as part of its safety practices, we encourage you to take it as part of your own safety program. We also invite you to view all the installments of the NRC Safety Series and watch them periodically as a refresher. When it comes to safety on the railroad, we are counting on everyone to do their part by being as informed and knowledgeable as possible. If you have any questions or comments, please ask your safety manager or your immediate supervisor. Let's work together so we can all make it home safely to our families. Thank you for your time, and make it your job to keep the railroad work sites safe.